Welcome to my channel. My name's Bissy, and of course, the Vampire Lestat Season 3 of Interview with the Vampire is basically one huge revelation. Lestat has decided to tell everybody everything, and to tell it his way. However, it would seem a little reluctantly, according to showrunner Roland Jones. Lestat is very, very, very reluctant to do this, but I don't believe he's going to start there. No. I think he actually let a lot of information slip during seasons 1 and 2 of Interview with the Vampire. He kept so many secrets for so long, literally hundreds of years. But there's something about being with Louis that seems to turn Lestat into something of a big mouth. I've broken down every time Lestat let slip something very important. If you're enjoying my videos, please do consider subscribing and joining my clean club. I've got more on that later. But with that said, let's get into the video. During the trial, with reference to Nicky throwing himself into the fire, Lestat looks at Armand and says,
"With a little help from others."
I caught it on my first watch, but I had no clue what it meant until I read The Vampire Lestat. If you'd like to stay away from book spoilers, please jump to this timestamp, as I am going to quote from the book to explain the history that Lestat is hinting at here. Ready? Okay. So in the novel The Vampire Lestat, Lestat had been travelling and finally received a large packet of letters that had been waiting for him. Within those letters, there was news of Nicky's treatment, particularly by Armand, who is referred to by the writer as their oldest friend. They call Nicky their divine violinist. They stick to him in every waking moment, and he is tied to a chair and forced to write plays. Further into his travels, Lestat receives another letter. He is told that Nicolas still despises him as much as ever. He is overwhelmed by his powers, dazzled and maddened by his vision. We have seen it all, and its sorry finish before. Yet, he has written his greatest play this last month, where the sound of a young violinist's music raises vampires from their graves. Upon their arrival in Cairo, there was a strange package waiting for him. Lestat was perplexed why he would be receiving a large package. He stared at it for an hour and asked Gabriella, to leave so he could open it. Lestat opens the package and sees the case for Nicolas's Stradivarius violin. Side note, Lestat will be playing a Stratocaster guitar in The Vampire Lestat. I'm aware that they are completely different, but when I was writing this script, I just had to look up the guitar from this image again, because I thought, oh my goodness, I've gotten it wrong in my previous breakdown. But thankfully, I hadn't. Lestat reads the letter that accompanies Nicky's violin. Lestat finds out that Armand had imprisoned Nicolas and starved and tortured him. But N, maddened by the pain and the starvation, for this can alter the temperament completely, slipped into an unbreakable silence and remained so for a considerable length of time. Nicolas quietly went about settling his affairs and made a plan. At last, he came to us and spoke only to tell us that in the manner of a mortal, he had put in order his business affairs. A stack of freshly written papers was asked to have, and we must call together for him, somewhere in the countryside. It was clear what Nicky was planning, but he threatened to use the theatre as his funeral pyre if they didn't come. Nicky had thought of Lestat in his plans too, and asked that the violin be given to him. But here, send this to my maker, and he put the violin into my hands. And finally, Nicky, in the presence of the troupe, jumps. And I think we were never more moved, never more in terror, never more sad. But understand, we did all we could to prevent what occurred. Another side note, I could not prevent it. Where have I heard that sentiment before? So yeah, with that one little line in the trial, Lestat cracked open the door to something massive. And I think we may be getting into this in season 3. In season 1, episode 7, Louis and Lestat are discussing where they should relocate to. Louis mentions some locations where they might set up their new home and suggests some places in Europe. The idea of Greece comes up and what they might find there. Lestat absent-mindedly mutters,
Sun worship is hot springs. Those who must be kept.
What was that?
Nothing.
So on my first watch, I hadn't read any of the books. So this completely washed over me, just as much as it probably washed over Louis's head too. But when I watched it again after reading the books, I couldn't believe that Lestat actually said it. He did well to cover it up, I think. But it did make me think. They and his time with Marius must never be too far from the forefront of his mind. It wasn't long before he moved to America and met Louis that he had his time with Marius, and indeed learned about those who must be kept. And of course, it wasn't long after Marius's instruction to Lestat to live at least one human lifetime in its fullest that he went on to meet Louis. Lestat seemed scared of Greece, actually. Well, of Europe in general. Is it because he is still trying to keep the secret in that moment, despite Louis and Claudia in particular making it pretty difficult at times? Is the line between lying and keeping a promise so blurred at this point in his relationship with Louis that the edges are beginning to blur? I wonder if Lestat led on more to Louis during their relationship, as he is speaking to Louis whilst referring to Armand when he says, "I have the blood of Akasha in me." He doesn't know who that is. In season 2, episode 8. I'll get more into that soon, but I do think it's important to point this out. Louis doesn't seem perplexed at who Lestat is speaking about here. Does he know the secret already? Or will he be as surprised as the rest of the vampire community when Lestat exposes all in the Vampire Lestat? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. So in season 2, episode 8, after the trial, after Claudia and Madeleine's passing, and after Louis' rampage, Louis and Armand approached Lestat in Magnus's lair. Side note, Armand already knew not only that Lestat was still in France, but also where he was exactly. Was Lestat still in touch with the coven in the days and weeks after the trial? Did Lestat allow his thoughts to be read? Or is Armand so strong that even Lestat can't completely close his mind to him? Another possibility is that Lestat is in that much of an emotional state that he isn't even thinking about closing his mind. Or was Lestat hoping that somehow he'd see Louis again, even if it meant he'd be with Armand? Was Lestat okay with being the next stop on Louis' rampage, as this is some time after the trial and Louis' banishment? Also, although he was aware of Louis' rampage, Lestat seemed unaware that Armand had escaped Louis' rage and was still alive. Interesting. Louis displays that he now has the fire gift and Armand joins him. Lestat looks at both of them and says,
I have the blood of Akasha in me. He doesn't know who that is. But the fact in and of itself makes your immediate desire an impossibility. I'd have to be willing, and I'm not in the mood.
Now, I broke down the significance of this line in my Lestat's Powers video. Please do check it out, specifically this timestamp. But very briefly, the fact that Lestat has Akasha's blood in him is huge. Again, if you don't want any book spoilers, please jump to this timestamp. She is the most ancient, the queen. The secret that so few vampires know is that all of them are connected to the source. And as Lestat has fed directly from Akasha, he now has the source of all vampires running through his veins. So her protection is now his protection. Does Louis know this already? It's obvious that Armand doesn't, and I cannot wait to see his reaction to finding this out in the Vampire Lestat, especially knowing where Lestat gained this information from. But does Louis know this already? And if he does, it must have been Lestat that told him, right? During Louis and Armand's fight in season 2, episode 5, where they both cut to the absolute bone with their words, Louis mocks Armand and says,
Let's try you. I'm the vampire Armand and my daddy vampire grew me into a little bit.
Armand is seething, and Louis sees this. He follows that by getting even closer to his face
Blank,
and saying,
half apocalyptic. Look, but what does it mean tonight? Huh? Does you want to lick my boots or chop my hands off?
Now, not everyone has read the books, so for anyone who hasn't, but also wants to know some context, I'm going to get into the significance of this line. If you'd prefer not to know, please jump to this timestamp. So as described in the first section of this video, Lestat learns of Nicky's treatment by Armand through letters from a trusted contact back in Paris. In the letter, she wrote, "Our oldest friend," referring to Armand, "maddened by the excesses of our violinist, finally imprisoned him in your old residence. And although his violin was given him into his cell, his hands were taken away." The letter goes on to say, "And the appendages in question were kept safe by our old friend, who allowed our wounded one no sustenance for 5 nights." When I first read this, I couldn't believe it. I had to reread it a number of times because I couldn't take in the cruelty of it. Armand cut Nicky's hands off, placed him in a cell in their ex's property, then placed his most loved violin in with him as torture. My goodness. And it was only after the troupe implored Armand to let him go that Nicky was freed. Finally, after the entire troupe had prevailed upon our oldest friend to release N and give back to him all that was his, it was done. So my question is, how did Louis know about Nicky's hands? Did Armand confess to Louis his most monstrous actions during their 30-odd relationship at that point? The way he opened up to Louis in the Louvre about the monstrous things that were done to him? Or did Lestat tell Louis about what had happened to his first love, but using no names, long before Louis met Armand? I think the latter is more likely, but I could be entirely wrong. What do you think? Just before his confrontation with Louis and Armand, Lestat is crouched on the floor, in the location where his maker held the so-called disappointments. This, the place where Lestat's mortal life ended, the building where his deepest abandonment occurred, where the scariest things he had ever witnessed happened, up until that point anyway. Lestat took himself back there to think about why he does what he does, why he crossed an ocean to rehearse a play that would eventually end the life of his daughter. To himself, he speaks Magnus's words. The full quote from the book goes like this: "You're dying, wolf killer. The light's going out of your blue eyes like all the summer days have gone. Ask for it, child. Ask and you shall receive." We, the viewer, see this scene, but I don't know for sure that Louis heard this himself. But the show is giving us a glimpse into the past here. Lestat chose the location of his turning after he had just witnessed and participated in the demise of his daughter, the place where his life ended, and this new immortal existence was forced upon him. What does that say about him? What are the makers of this show trying to show us? Is the reluctance that showrunner Roland Jones alluded to in the Entertainment Weekly interview rooted here? It's so interesting and I can't wait to find out. Also in Season 2, Episode 8, Lestat refers to Armand as the Gremlin as he points to where he stands. This has been Lestat's name for Armand for centuries, and there is a whole load of history attached to it. And during their fight in San Francisco in 1973, Louis says to Armand,
Is it the Gremlin or the good nurse tonight?
but as far as we the viewer have seen, Lestat never actually mentions Armand by name to Louis. He barely spoke about Paris at all. So was it just that one time when Lestat referred to Armand as a gremlin in the 40s? Or during their 30-year relationship, had Lestat referred to somebody, an ex or another vampire, as the Gremlin, and this was him letting Louis know that this is who it was? I don't know, it's just one of my theories, and I don't know if we'll ever get the answer, but I really hope we do in the Vampire Lestat. What exactly was Dreamstat about to say when he said,
Let me tell you a little something about 18th century Armand.
Of course, Dreamstat is a personification of Louis' subconscious. These are his thoughts, images and words drawn from his own mind and memories. So again, how does Louis' subconscious know about 18th century Armand? How does it know enough to want to warn him? I really wonder if Lestat spoke about Armand's deeds and actions without specifically naming him, or, as I said in the last point, maybe called him something else, the Gremlin maybe, or ascribing separate stories to this one person. I also wonder if Louis' subconscious, after getting to know Armand, is working overtime and has put 2 and 2 together. It's just another theory that I have, but it's bugged me for months now. If Lestat didn't let this information slip to Louis, why do you think Dreamstat said that line? Why do you think Louis thought it? I wonder. I've got a feeling that during their 30 years together, Lestat was a lot more open with Louis than Louis has let on. I think he let a lot of information slip, but didn't come out and expose all of his secrets outright, much to Claudia's dismay. So did I miss any of the other times Lestat let something really important slip? I can't wait to hear your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting like and subscribing. I upload Interview with the Vampire videos every week, and members of my Clean Club get those videos early, as soon as they're done. There's also loads of extra perks that you get for being a member. I would love it if you could join, and I will see you in the comments. Thank you. Bye.